This is the
Oh,
third
just
meeting.
almost there. Hang on.
Correction.
Wait, hang on, sorry, he just said one more.
Almost there.
Almost there. Sorry. So when this is done,
Now you're live.
This is the,
we're good?
all right, this is our third meeting of the Corrections Task Force. The date is February 22nd. We've got our agenda. I think everyone has been given the agenda, but before that, I'm going to ask the Vice Chair if she can call the roll so that we can determine
Alderman Vaccaro,
I'm present.
let's see.
Well,
Boyd,
Boyd, Jamila.
yeah, Alderman Boyd is not present.
not present.
Senator Nasheed, not present. Adolphus Pruitt,
Here I am.
present. Brad Pompey,
Present.
Pastor Norris,
Present.
Reverend Gray,
Present.
and Pam Walker is present.
We do have a form for this morning. There are two additions to our agenda this morning for the consultant's presentation. We want to add an update from the chairperson and an update from the vice chairperson to be done prior to the introduction of the consultant. So our agenda today is the approval of the agenda, the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, the updates from the chair, updates from the vice chair, the introduction of the consultant and the consultant's presentation. So can we get a motion to accept the agenda with the correction, with the addition?
I so move to accept the agenda with the noted correction.
It has been moved by Reverend Norris, is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Alderman Vaccaro. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. You received the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to
It's
accept.
moved by Alderman Vaccaro. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Reverend Norris. All in favor of question?
Okay, there's one thing in the minutes. I'd like to reflect that says that I'm pastor of St. James, which is true, but I think it's also important to note that I'm the president of the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition, so that the record reflects that the clergy of the city are reflective of the same.
So the minutes,
You object to you object to that.
But I just think it.
Right, so you would object to the minutes and we have to make the change and approve them as
Yes.
changed.
Yeah, approve it.
So I'll withdraw my motion on the minutes.
well, let the minutes reflect an addition that Reverend Charles Norris, in addition to being the pastor of St. James AME Church, is also the president of the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition, just as an addition.
So I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes as amended.
It's been moved by Alderman Vaccaro. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Reverend Norris. Any further correction to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, nay. Motion carries. All right, then, we're gonna move on. There's been a lot of communication going back and forth, which has been a good thing. And I think Brad will speak to the letters that we have received, or the letters that we have received from the law department for the city of St. Louis, the circuit court judge, Mike Mullen, and two letters actually from the law department as it pertains to our task, our purpose as a task force, and the request for documents and information from the task force. So when we get to our consultant presentation, Brad will bring us up to speed and give us a summary, actually what those three communications mean in moving forward. Mr. Brian Champion has been with us, referred to us or assigned to us by when he was with the Department of Public Safety. But he has been transferred now to the city councilor's office. And I did send a letter to Judge Edwards asking him if there would be any conflict of interest based upon the fact that now he's with the city councilor. And I did receive information back from the department regarding that. Brian assisted us this morning. He has been a valuable asset to us. But moving forward, we have asked the mayor's office if they would assign someone else to assist us with logistical work so there would be no perceived conflict of interest. And we're waiting on that response. And hopefully we'll get that today. In addition to that, as I said, we're very pleased with the level of work that Brian has given to the task force. And I want to make sure that this is no way a reflection of him at all. It's just that as a task force, we want to make sure that we avoid any perception of conflict of interest. So I did want to make that report. Our vice chairperson, Ms. Walker, will be taking the minutes for the meeting in the absence of any staff or logistical support, but we hope that that will be done more sooner than later. Most of you also, I'm sure you have been aware that there's been a lot of commentary in the media regarding the task force. Different narrative, different comments, but we want to be very clear to people, to the public. We were assigned to do a specific task, which has absolutely nothing to do with the workhouse, and we want to make that very clear. The mayor gave us a mandate to review 3 urgent items related to the Justice Center. To investigate the alleged concerns and complaints regarding food, water, temperature, and clothing. The need to begin moving cases through the 22nd Judicial Circuit and any other measures possible to address the isolation and uncertainty resulting from the halting of court cases for nearly 1 year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And 3, to become apprised of the urgent building and equipment needs of the facility, which is approximately 20 years old. That's our mandate. And we've undertaken this task. We have a creditable group of members on the task force who are committed to following through with what we've been asked to do. Each individual has given up their time and are providing their expertise, their various levels of expertise to get this job done as quickly as possible. In the last meeting, we indicated that we wanted to be finished with this no later than the 12th, between the 15th and the 12th of March. If we can get it done sooner, then we will endeavor to get it done soon. But those were the dates that we discussed. Those were the dates that we felt were reasonable, and it is our commitment. We understand the urgency of this. We understand that the mayor has asked for answers, and the public has asked for answers. And we will endeavor to do everything we can to provide whatever answers we come up with, whatever recommendations we come up with. We want to do that as quickly as possible, but we want to do a thorough investigation and review that will be transparent and that will be accountable to the public. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood that. And one last point. Someone said this task force is too little, too late. I disagree. I think my fellow task force members believe that anything that we can do is better than doing nothing. And there are other organizations that are doing tremendous work around the area of criminal justice reform, prison reform, supporting detainees, people who are incarcerated, and we applaud that. But we have a specific mandate. We will do that mandate, and we encourage others to continue with the mandate that they have as well. We do have a public hearing scheduled for this afternoon from 2 to 4 and from 6 to 8. We encourage people who have something to say, evidence to provide, documents to share those testimonies, that documentation and that evidence to the task force so that we can have all the information that we need in order to do our job. And now I'll turn it over to I think the Vice Chair has an update that she wants to do.
Yes, thank you. As the public health representative in general on this task force, I do not represent any particular association or group. Just looking at it through the lens of my experience in public health, I've been focused a lot on the COVID aspects, the sanitation aspects, and where we are with that. The good news is, I think most of you saw in the media that last Thursday, they offered vaccine to 65 high-risk detainees that they had identified at risk for serious illness or death from COVID. 22 agreed to the vaccine and have their first shot. I think that's real progress. And I'm hoping that as others see that those 22 did not have adverse events or any problems, that they will come forward and want vaccine as well. And I hope that continues to be offered. The other update I have is the COVID-19 assessment toolkit that I designed for us to kind of track as we go through the process, who said what we identified. I sent that to Commissioner Glass for his input. I've not heard back from him. So I recommend we just move forward with that toolkit and, give him a continuous opportunity to give us feedback into what we're hearing and what we're finding and our final recommendations for accuracy's purpose. I still think that there are a lot of things that we need. I've reviewed all the documentation submitted to us in writing and all the web pages that we've been told have a lot of information. And I think there's still a lot of data that we need that is not there. As an example, the monthly reports are very good. They show the census, they show who's requested medical assistance, they show when drugs have been found, but we don't have one for January, which is when the incident occurred. So I think we need to see that monthly report. It's mid-February. It may take them a while to get it done, which could be the reason it's not posted. So not accusing anybody of any obfuscation or anything. I just think we need to see those numbers. The other thing is, I'd like to know how many COVID cases they've had since March among the guards and the detainees. It will tell us how big the problem is, if there is a problem. And we need to know where they are with testing. Commissioner Glass told us he would send people to every person, every detainee, and offer them testing. I'd like to know how many agreed to that, how many didn't, how often they test the guards, and if they've tested the guards. We also, other information that can inform us that we've requested are the DOH sanitation inspections, the last one that they've conducted, and we asked that if one has not been conducted since the incidents in January, that one be conducted. Our tours and our interviews with both guards and detainees. And I would add here for later discussion, a guard has requested that we added a guard to this task force. So just for later consideration, before I forget, that request was made of me. At this point, I don't have enough information for any conclusions or recommendations about health and safety are charge number one. In fact, I don't know how people are drawing their conclusions. Either Mr. Garvin's letter stating that everything was fine, or editorials that I've seen, or news articles that I've seen. If people have information regarding our first charge, I would love for them to share that with us, and to come forward and inform us, because right now we don't have enough information, I don't think, to make sound assessments. Brad's also been working on the data piece and talking to a lot of people to try to get us what we need, and he may have updates in this report. So for right now, that's all I have. We're still working on it. I don't intend to give up.
We can, so if it goes beyond the group, I have a public safety meeting Tuesday. And certainly I can ask for those, as long as we don't ask for any specific like names or whatever, but we can say how many people have tested. And I don't think we're violating anything if we ask. So how many have been tested, how many have been treated? I don't see that as a problem. And if we're going to do that, I guess then I'll make sure that you would come in as a speaker, since it's all going to be the medical side. Anybody can if they want to, but we hit, that Prop S money that we have to get out to different groups, which is like $1 million to all these different groups. I have to get that out of committee, so I got to do that Thursday. But I can add, just, having you come on and, but you have to send me an email, because it's far to Terry, because we would have to put that at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting.
Reverend Gray, or I guess we can discuss that at the end of how to approach that.
Okay. So it's up to you guys.
I'd be glad to, if Reverend, the chairman wants me to.
Okay, and I think it's important that information, not specifics, but, it's going to prove or disprove that, the COVID stuff isn't as rampant, or maybe it is, but at least if we get real numbers, we can at least, dispute, or at least put the facts out rather than the fiction.
Right, yeah, we're just fact finding,
Right,
I just want facts right now.
right, and that's what we
And I
do.
appreciate opinions, but I'd like to know if those are based on fact, and if I didn't get those facts.
I think we can get the facts. I don't
Thank
think
you,
it'd be that hard.
thank you.
So, thank you very much, Ms. Warren. Now, what we'll do now is that we'll turn it over to the consultant, just as an introduction. I've been very impressed with the level and the quality of work that Mr. Hum has given. He has been accessible. I think that the information that he has provided for us has been extremely informative and helpful in our understanding of the process and procedures within the within the correction center. His contribution, I believe, has been invaluable, and his guidance has kept us on track. And to be very honest, his interpretation and the information that he has given to myself as the chair and to the task force has probably kept us calm and keeps us deliberate in the task that we have. We're hoping this morning that in his presentation that he'll be able to help us to summarize the communication that we have gotten, the 2 bits of communications or letters of communication from the city council as it relates to sunshine law compliance, the letter from the city councilor as it relates to, and particularly, I think most important, the task force request for information. In that, In these letters, we continue to be reminded of what our job is. In these letters, I think we're very clear what our task is, but we continue to be reminded what our task is under no uncertain terms. And so, as I said, the letter from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So I'm hoping that in Brad's presentation, we'll be able to understand better what this communication means, but also for me, what restrictions are in. What are these letters saying that we cannot do? And so I think that that's most important to the task force. So Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Just by way of introduction, again, my name is Brad Hoff. I come from Wisconsin. I'm working on my 26th year in corrections now, working for the Department of Corrections in Wisconsin. I worked in many roles there, starting as a correctional officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, unit manager, deputy warden, running prison facilities. And then I switched over to be a jail inspector, inspecting jails such as CJC, except obviously in Wisconsin. And now I'm in the Department of Internal Affairs with inmate complaints. So I bring different views as far as understanding the grievance system for inmates, as jail inspector, and as administrator. Then I also work as a consultant, obviously independently, and I've done some work for the National Institute of Corrections, which was my first introduction there in St. Louis. So that's just a little bit of my background and the different angles that I would take at looking at the process. By the end of today, what I hope to do is provide you with all the information I have, thoughts on how we can move forward, and leaving here with a concrete plan we have a tentative plan, but a concrete plan on any adjustments that need to be made between now and our final report. And as the chairman said, making sure we all understand correspondence that's been given to us and those sort of things. But I have an outline that I provided you that is going to try to guide us through that discussion today. And Ms. Walker already provided the update as far as what we have on COVID-19. And as far as locks, the only thing I can tell you at this point is what's been in the media as far as the dedication of the money funds. And there's been a contract and they're moving forward with that. I suspect when we do our on-site assessment and have a discussion with Commissioner Glass, we'll get updates on that, but I have not been provided anything further. And as far as COVID-19, what Pam has is what we have as far as updates, but I'll talk a little bit more about COVID-19 and the data. I have on the agenda to review
Just one comment. I did look for the lock RFP on the city's bid page and it's not there. It doesn't mean it wasn't there before Saturday and they approved something. But it'd be nice to see that contract in the RFP.
When we get to the data discussion, I intend to set
Gotcha.
out a list of other things that we want to make sure we get to our end product.
And so just to be clear that the understanding is that the contract has been approved by the city for the locks, for the restitution to resolve the lock.
What
But you
I
can't
read in the
find it on-
media was they approved the budget committee of the Board of Aldermen approved 1.5 million. And it will take about 12 weeks to get the work done. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. It was in the media.
I can see if they'll send us something real quick. I'll call over.
Okay.
Is there anything else I need to get? That quick, I can get a copy of the contract, I'm sure.
Excuse me.
He said he could get a copy of
The
that.
contract,
Oh, sure.
if you don't have it, I can provide you.
No, I don't have it.
I'll see if I can get it.
The other, moving down the outline, I wanted to clearly review the tasks identified by the mayor had identified for us. The chairman has viewed those and read those, so there's no sense in me reading them again. My purpose in reviewing that is to understand that, and we'll get to the letters that you've been provided, but our task has been made very clear to us that it's very narrow. And those are the three things that we are going to be allowed to look into. And that's what they want from us. So that was my only reason for reading those, but I won't be redundant. So update on a meeting with the judicial and correspondence from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. If you recall from our first meeting, I was tasked with setting up a meeting with the judge or judges, and I made that contact. And as you probably all know, there are many things going on in the city of St. Louis, different lawsuits, different progresses or meetings, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and there's the reasons that the judge could not come in person with conflicts. But we did receive a letter from the executive assistant, I hope I have that position right, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Debbie Allen.
Mhm.
Right. Coming, kind of outlining some of the things that they're doing. And she did offer up possibly having a discussion with Judge Stelzner. Did I say that right?
Stelzer.
Stelzner. I made that request, and if we hear anything back, I assume that would be writing. And I also made a request from Debbie Allen to summarize the criminal process for us. But again, understanding the conflicts, they're not going to be able to personally.
Right.
That's just
Because they're gonna- Very good chance they'll be hearing the cases that are being led against the city. So,
just to avoid conflict. So it makes sense. It's understandable that they have that. And we'll see what's provided as far as the correspondence that may help us understand, more of the issues, but as we look at number 2, I mean, one of the things we'll look at is some of the data. The length of stay issue is no doubt one of the concerns and one of the frustrations from the detaining population.
here, I mean, can I speak on any of these points, or are you just gonna go through them?
Well, I would ask if the task force has questions of Brad as he goes through. I think questions for clarification would be appropriate. But I would ask that let's take some notes. And at the end of the presentation, if we want to follow that, but I definitely want Brad to be able to give me the clarification. So I would ask, but if task force members have questions for clarification, of course, that would be appropriate. Alderman, do you have questions as it relates to?
Well, no, just I had comments on the length of stay, and so if you want, I'll wait till we get to the end on the comments, because the length of stay is due to COVID. I think if we ask anything, I think what we should ask is how many, because a lot of, so what we have, 800 people, there's 1,900 cases, 800 here, 220 of those are federal, the rest are here. Out of those 600, I guess we should ask how many are plea, how many are plea? I think we should ask that at Kim Gardner's office. Is she prepared to do 600 cases tomorrow? Or how many of them are, because there are cases that can be done that don't need a jury. And I think we should send something over to the judges asking, I think they would be prepared to start moving some of these through. We can't ask people to come in as jurors as long as it's COVID's around. And we can't do it, So I don't know anything, I don't know how we can go about speeding up the cases. First off, it's a state thing, it's 22nd judicial, but I guess I would say we should send something to Kim Gardner's office asking where they're in as far as pleas, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that just soon plea and start getting their sentence over. And how many cases are ready to move through right now without a jury? Because I believe there's got to be cases that, and some of them probably could already have just time served and be released.
So it's just a letter to Kim Gardner's office.
I would just ask how many.
Asking the question, are there cases that can be accelerated?
that don't need a jury to complete the plea, because I think what my understanding, and of course, I often go through, the workouts. And one of the things people tell me is, I just want to plea. I mean, I'm going to get time served. I just want to get out if I can get just a plea.
No, I mean, I think that it's clear. So, we could put that on the action item.
I would think that we,
And I know, and Ms. Walker's taking some notes too, as far as action items, that we can go back and carry.
because of
I would
code,
say that the request from Judge Stills that I made this morning, requests that information. As far as an outline of the issues with length of stay both pre-COVID and after COVID, and how COVID has affected that and the data. So I think we should wait for that response.
the data is one thing, but actually moving the cases along, if the prosecutor's office is ready with their people to plead or go, you can do a lot of cases without a jury. And if someone requests a jury trial, they're certainly entitled to a jury trial, but you're not going to get one because of COVID. So I don't know what we can do to force that. I mean, you can't tell jurors, you're going to come in and put them all in that room and do a super spreader event. I'm hoping by summer, but there are cases. And again, I'm only going by personal knowledge.
But I think we understand all of it. I think what Brad has indicated that after the letter, after the response from the judge, that would probably predicate the next step based upon what he says. But I think that we're just making the notation to have the city prosecutor within that loop. So I think that's clear.
Yeah, I think,
Very specific.
Yeah.
I think it's very specific to those persons that are in a position to plead.
right, to
Yeah,
move
I think
on
that's the
through.
Specific nature of it,
'Cause
that
we're-
don't need a jury.
Right,
But
Right.
I think we're
holding
clear.
people-
I think we're
we're
clear.
holding people that could be out tomorrow,
Yeah, I get that.
plea and move, and
You know,
we can't,
clarify
and we can't force people to come to jury.
I just have one question for clarification in the letter, also, Brad, from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Is there any overlap in what they're doing and what we're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, basically, they are, part of their task is they are addressing number two. And as they point out in the letter, there's certain ordinances and rules in place on what they can and can't share. I mean, I believe in transparency, will hardly anything they can share, they should share. They're working on a progress. There's a number of people, and I believe, including one of our task force members is on that coordinating council. So they're working on that issue.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
yeah, as it relates to item 2, is it possible I can comment at this point in time? Is it
yes,
appropriate?
I wanted Brad, right after Brad, just that question, but Brad just indicated that we do have a member on the task force, Alderman Boyd, is part of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Hopefully that will be a benefit to us, but as Brad said, it's a matter of getting that documentation of what they can give us and what they cannot give us. And I believe that the letter from the judge may help us to determine that. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I just want to make 2 quick comments. One as relates to this thing about moving the cases and plea agreements and things of that nature. All of these folks are represented by counsel. If my assumption is those detainees who are indicating that they just want to plea and get time served, I think that's discussions they should be having with counsel. I don't know if we should be dipping our toe in that water at all. But my biggest concern is that while we're talking about process as relates to the courts moving cases along, I just want to make sure that we do not overlook or not give a credence to the second part of the sentence that that's part of our task number 2, because while it talks about the need to move the cases forward, but if unless I'm reading this wrong, it says in any other measures possible to address the isolation and uncertainty resulting from the halt of court cases for nearly 1 year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, and I don't know if Pam, but this falls in your belly or not, but I think that we do have opportunity to look at how detainees are being managed now and come up with recommendations as relates to how we can, or measures that relates to how can we address the isolation and uncertainty. And I don't know if that means that the only way to do that is to move cases through the court as quickly as possible during COVID. I think that should happen, but I just want to make sure we don't overlook that there may be some things that we can recommend and ask them to put in place that goes directly to the condition of how the inmates feel about being in this predicament, and what creative things can we come up with that may help them navigate this issue of isolation and all these uncertainty while they try to wait this COVID out, because we don't have any control over the courts and how they move things along, but we may have the ability to address how these detainees are feeling based on the predicament they caught up in.
Thank you. I think Ms. Walker has a brief response, and then Brad has a response as well.
Yes, I appreciate that, Mr. Pruitt, and I agree with you. And as we learn through this process, and you know, Brad continues to get some answers for us. We talk to detainees, we talk to guards. There are some other places that are other states in particular that have figured out how to manage this by video hearings, video trials, video pleas, video going before the judge. I mean, I do think there are some things that we can recommend if we learn that they are indeed not happening. But at this point, I don't know what's happening and what isn't happening. So, you know, hopefully in the next week, as we get closer to coming up with a list of recommendations, we'll have some clarity on that. But I agree with you. Their work is their work, but we've been charged to really look at how COVID has impacted that work. One of my questions is, have they responded to that? You know, this work that they're doing started in 2018. Did they adjust in March to what might be coming or might be happening as a result of COVID? I just don't know that. So that Brad may, but maybe getting at it.
No, only thing I would say to that is you're exactly right. And further down in the outline, we're talking about our goals and how we reach those goals. And two of the topics that I have is how we address isolation due to COVID-19 and the backlog of the court case, and identify, recommend ways to mitigate that isolation. So that's definitely on the agenda to discuss.
So we'll circle back around to that, Mr. Pruitt, for some more thorough discussion. Finally, just for me on the latter, the last part, I'm trying to understand. As Pam said, I'd like to know the reports that they've done, just any information that they've provided. As you indicated, they've existed since 2018. And it would be important to know, as you said, did they change, did they accelerate anything when the pandemic came? What did they do then? And maybe it's just me, this uncoordinated, this very last sentence of the letter, uncoordinated changes do have consequences. And so I'm not sure what that means. I mean, we want to work with them, get information from them as it pertains to our mandate. And we want to make sure that we're talking to all of the people who have been involved. So I'm glad that Brad has reached out to them. I think all of us look forward to the response from the judge to see how we can have a coordinated mission so that whatever happens is gonna be productive. So I was a bit concerned about the letter. I'm glad that Brad is dealing with it and not me. And so,
Well, I think the letter also points to Commissioner Glass's comments about the difficulties, not the word, right word, but the complexity of having all these various organizations interact with one another. The letter goes to state the different systems that are in play now. So you have all of these different criterias for these various systems, and so there's not one place that you can get all the information for a detainee or an inmate. There are about 5 different systems from 5 different organizations with 5 different goals and stats. So I think that coordinating that last sentence definitely speaks to that complexity.
And that was a good thing that she had pointed out in the letter, that they do have, you have the sheriff, police, and corrections all in this building. So it makes it complex, quite different than most jurisdictions across the country, quite frankly. But they have different data systems that don't talk to each other. That's already been identified, and they're working on that, because that will help with planning and classification and all those things. And so that's kind of the sort of thing that the CJCC is working on. And I think to the last comment that was made in there, I think what I gathered from that is they do have a planned process, and they're working. They have 3 standing committees that are working on different things that she outlines in there. They have a whole ton of things if you look on their website that they've done. And as I understand it, that's all that's public at this time. It'd be nice to have a little more transparency, but I understand that the data was in place as well. But that's one of the things that we do a criminal justice assessment or a facility assessment. The first thing we look at is the criminal justice system, how that's affecting the jail. Because they don't have control on who comes, when they leave, how long they stay. They don't have that. They don't have control of that. So understanding who's making the arrest, the laws that require arrest, the bond issues, all those things, and that's why we have the Justice Coordinating Council. We would never be able to tackle all those tasks in a 2-week task force. So that's why it's better left with the Coordinating Council.
But we can make a recommendation, and I'll go back to where a simple recommendation is that in order to speed things up, that cases that are willing and ready to plead that don't require a jury, that the prosecutor and the judges move forward with those cases. It's the only answer we could have to that, because we can't force the 22nd judicial. We have no say over them.
We don't even know that they're not moving forward.
Yeah, right.
We don't even know that.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing.
So I think.
But
the issue
we
is
can do a
that they need to
recommendation.
work on the issue. We can recommend in our final report, and no doubt that will be one issue. We'll make a recommendation that they need to further look into this issue, because you're making an assumption. I don't even think we know that.
Did she put a link in her letter to their reports? 'Cause I looked and can't find their reports online, so that would be helpful if they would provide us with a link. Because that might answer many of our questions.
I can certainly follow.
Yeah.
But I really think that, that number 2, other than addressing the isolation and COVID part,
Yeah.
that is a bigger animal than we can tackle in a short
In a
task
week.
force.
Yeah.
That's why it's important that they have that criminal justice coordinating council and the stakeholders participate.
Yeah.
And I think, we can certainly make a long list of, what we recommend the coordinating council look at A through Z, but that is a very complex process that they're looking at. It's going to take some time.
I think my recommendation at this point, based on the fact that I just learned about this from her letter, is that more transparency and more public notification of what they are doing on a regular basis, maybe a press release once in a while, might help the public understand that they exist and what they're doing. So having to try to find them.
And I would,
But we'll look at that a week from now when we get to recommendation.
Right, the
I
other,
would ask that you start keeping a list. And we're going to talk about this as we go on, because we need to focus this to our end goal when that report comes.
Right.
Is what are your observations and what are your recommendations for both those observations? So start to keep that list, but we'll focus in on the process before we leave here today.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
So one last thing, it's just a question this time. So I understand what you do, so you're more like an advocate for the prisoners as much as anything with the jails, right?
I'm not an advocate, I'm a complaint examiner.
Okay. My thing I'd like to add to our list of things would be, do we have someone in that role here? And if we don't, we should highly consider putting someone in. Because again, if we get a complaint, as far as I know, I would assume the city council looks into complaints, which I don't think that, I have issues with that all on my own anyway, but I think they should be some completely independent that could come and present to public safety or to whoever. And you say it's an inspector, it's still an advocate. If somebody says, look, this is happening, you're gonna go check it, right?
Right.
And if it's happening, then you're gonna report to somebody, right?
And they do have a grievance process here, and that's one of the things, we look at the clothing and the food and the water.
Right. But where's it go?
We'll look at the grievance process. It's an internal process, but they have a policy and procedure in place to handle grievances. And that's one of the things that we'll look at. If we can get to the crux of our agenda here. We'll talk.
Right, and I'll stop from there, but
All right,
that would
I
be
won't
my other
interrupt you. I won't
recommendation.
interrupt you anymore.
And as I said, if as he goes through,
Yeah.
if there's a question that we need to answer, we need to go ahead and answer that, ask that question. And if there's a recommendation that through the presentation, you think of, please go and just put that out so we can make sure.
I
that
got
we-
And
that.
then-
I got
and that's
that.
why I
So
put
question,
it,
recommendation, questions and recommendations.
well, that was my recommendation, but we go
I wrote it
externally,
down.
that we go externally, not internally,
I got
on a grievance.
So I would ask you to write that down. and we
She-
start
she-
talking about
Pam-
recommendations.
you.
Yeah, I
Pam's
got it.
writing it all
We
down.
got it. I agree.
My ADD doesn't allow me that.
You're fine.
Extra.
I got 3 or 5
Yeah, what
Ds
is that
behind
last
it.
D for?
Just to wrap up the judicial and the criminal justice coordinating council discussion, we have the final request out to the judge and to Ms. Allen. Is there any other discussion you want to take place
I
on
just,
that topic?
yeah, on, the.
And I keep
guess
checking
The
my
letter
phone
from,
for the
Mr.
answer.
Garvin, related to the sunshine law compliance. Basically, is that just a letter to educate us, that, and he indicates by definition, the task force is by definition a public governmental body because it falls within the definition of any advisory committee appointed by or at the direction of any of the named entities, basically the mayor. So the task force members are required to comply with the sunshine law. Is that going to be an impediment to what we're doing?
It's going to
Slow you down.
restrict us to comply with that, and that's part of my discussion here.
Okay.
That particular letter is just letting us know that we have to comply with that, and I'll talk about our data requests and where we're at with data. I'll talk about our on-site as far as touring and interviewing detainees and access, but that applies directly to that, because we're appointed counsel by the mayor, we have to follow.
Understand.
And
then
I think the only thing we
and-
need to change from what we're doing, because we're very public and we're very transparent, we know all our emails and texts could be sunshine.
Right,
We
that's
all
what I say,
know that.
save everything.
Yeah, we all know that. I think what we need to do is choose someone to be the keeper of the records per se. That doesn't mean they have to actually download everything and copy everything. But if we get a sunshine request that says we want to see all the texts and emails, who does that go to? And then that person reaches everybody on the committee and says, I need your text and email.
So would that be you or would that be Ms. Wong?
I would think it'd be the city council.
Someone with the city.
Yeah, I think the request would have to go through them. Because when you make one, you're gonna have to pay so much a page. You're gonna have to be specific
It's a
in what you ask, but
Process.
it would be something at the Board of Aldermen. They have to make that to our attorney. In this case, it would be the city council. So if somebody wants specifics, what text you and maybe Pam had, or
Yeah.
what text anybody has.
He said we needed to designate somebody.
Well,
So
I think
that
the
confused me because,
I think it's
We
the
would
city
be
councilor.
yeah, we would be, We can't designate him, but that's who it should be.
I
Right,
think we're talking about two different things. We have to keep a record
Right,
of what we do.
right.
we
As far
are.
as If
and-
someone has a request, our task ends when we issue our report unless they extend it. If you want to request something after that, that goes to your city councilors. So it's two different times.
All right.
Well, but they can't, so if somebody sends us a sunshine request, specifically, let's just say, I send a sunshine request to you.
Doesn't qualify.
I understand.
That go to the city.
Right, that's what I'm saying, it's gotta go through the city councilor's office, so I don't know what they're talking about appointing
Yeah,
somebody unless they're gonna assign us a attorney, and then we can say, yes, everything goes through this attorney, and it could be the young man that's here, but
We just need to clarify that.
sunshine requests have to go through the city, and they're gonna have to go through the city attorney. And if they wanna appoint us a specific attorney, that's fine. Then we'll have a dedicated person, and I think we should call over there and say, pick out what attorney you want, and if any sunshine requests come, they have to go through that specific attorney. None of us that here are qualified. Plus, there's a lot more to a sunshine request. There's cost, there's so much page, what are you looking for, it's got to go through them. We should ask them to appoint us an attorney.
Okay, I put that under action item.
Okay, thank you. And then Brad, you'll deal with the letter from the city council as it relates to task force enforcement information.
Yes.
Okay, so okay.
As far as keep for the record for minutes and stuff, Pam, I guess that you would explain
Yeah,
any minutes and
yeah,
documents. And that's,
yeah. Anything handed out at the meetings, anything,
okay.
and the minutes and the agenda.
So our next topic of discussion is the data request. So just kind of summarizing kind of where we are, how we got to where we're at. We had our first meeting, and as I understand, the 3 tasks were identified by the mayor. However, I believe that, and again, this is just my opinion, that there was some outreach that got past those 3 tasks. And everybody was able to put in what they wanted for a data request, and I just simply coordinated that, and it was submitted. And result of that was there's things requested that were outside of the tasks that were identified by the mayor. So in response to that, we got the letter from Judge Durker outlining, again, reminding us that there's ongoing litigation, there's ongoing criminal investigations. And so there's limited on what can be disclosed, and that's understandable. That's a common practice and for good reason, to protect people's constitutional process, right?
Brad, can I just clarify one thing for anybody who's listening that doesn't know? Judge Durker is not a judge. Judge Durker used to be a judge, and now he's an associate city councilor. So when he says Judge Durker, he's not speaking for the judicial system.
Right.
He's speaking for the city council's office. I was confused about that for about a week. but-
Should I refer to him as something else?
No,
No, that's what he wants.
he's still a
to be called.
judge, but he's not on the bench.
Just not a city.
Yeah.
So he explained that the rules that we have to function within, and then he replied to the data request, which outlined what they're going to provide, and that's going to be worked on this week in preparation for our next week's on-site assessment work. And he outlined what access will be provided to the facility, to staff, and to detainees. And again, this goes back to the sunshine issue when there's a quorum. That limits, what we can and can't do. So I guess we did talk about that in 3 aspects. So access to the facility, talked about touring. And, obviously, the group needs to tour the facility to see what they see. But in the letter from Judge Durker, it specifies that 2 people at a time will be toured. Now, 4 is a quorum, I understand, so it could be 3 to start a meeting sunshine law. But I would like everybody to see and hear the same thing. So understanding we have to violate the sunset sign rules, and I don't think we want a camera following us through on a tour.
Right.
I don't think that would be appropriate because it shows physical design and security and that sort of thing. I guess it's going to be a burden on the jail staff because they're going to have to conduct 4 different tours to break us up. So unless somebody has any other commentary, I guess we're going to have to go with that process. Unless Mr. Glass has some other discussions with the judge, if you'd like to do it differently.
Well, I'd like to make a request that Mr. Glass have that discussion with the judge. We're a task force of one unit. We're not individuals, and what we try to maintain at the beginning is that everyone see the same thing at the same time. That everyone has an opportunity to hear whatever questions are being asked at the same time, and to hear whatever answers are being given at the same time. If we do this piecemeal and 2 people go up here or 4 people go up there, we don't want any misinterpretation of questions that are asked or answers that are given. We don't want 4 different groups that have to come back and give 4 different reports. And so that would be my biggest concern. I do agree with you, if there's a staff problem, I think that our recommendation is more helpful in them being able to control and coordinate their staff. And so I would ask the task force to support the recommendation that
Well,
I mean, I understand that if we agree on the 4, at least the quorum, that's agreeable. But I think that my concern in the beginning is that everybody hear transparency, accountability. Everybody hear the same thing. Everybody sees the same thing at the same time.
well, then what I would suggest, and we would have to ask, we might be able to do it all together and still stay under the sunshine if we drop all the video and we do it strictly, no cameras, but by voice. We'd still do Zoom, but everything would be audio, not visual. And I think we would, and that's something I have to ask the attorneys, but I think we'd be covered under the sunshine law because we'd still be open and apparent. Anything we say would still be recorded. We can all go up at one time together. And I think we can get around the video by, and I could be wrong. But I'm thinking if we do it just using voice, because I agree, the other thing, video, if we accidentally get a person in the shot and they're not guilty of anything, then we're all open to lawsuits saying, you exposed me, now my family or my friends.
If we're just observing
That's all we're doing.
and we're making commitment up front that we're not going to have any discussions, we're not going to comment, we're not going to make any policy decisions. We're simply observing. Why does that have to be open to the public? I don't understand.
I don't think we were going to open that.
I think that's what his concerns seem to be, that because we're a public entity, we have to have open meetings. And therefore, it violates sunshine if we don't do that. It violates their privacy if we do that. So I don't,
Well, I mean,
other than 2 at a time, I guess 2 at a time, it's not an official meeting,
right.
and therefore we can do that.
And then
So
you
maybe we go 3 at a time. I don't know. It seemed to me we just be honest and upfront about it, and say, this is not a meeting,
But
this is a tour.
Right.
if we discuss anything during the tour, like you
But
said,
we
well, we
can't.
really should,
Well,
Fix this, and we
Chairman
really
Gray
should
would
do
have to
that.
say, stop, if that began to occur, then Chairman Gray would have to say that, stop, we're not gonna have that here.
All we're looking to do is.
Yeah,
So I will follow with that, because what I intend to do, and you tell me if you don't want to do this, is there's a number of things with the data request and the letter that I will respond. Say, based on our discussion today, this is what we feel we need, and we have this adjustment.
Yeah.
And this will be one of those issues.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, it's true.
yeah, You know, my concern is for the sake of time of us and them going backwards and forwards and trying to get them to agree on something, and ultimately they come up and say we don't agree, and we spent a week or so trying to get to a certain point where we have the information we need in order to finalize a report. I don't have a problem of designating some member or two members of the task force to one. He talked about these interviews of the representatives for the different pods. I don't have a problem with designating somebody to conduct those interviews and get the information back to us, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to measure that information against what we get from the different organizations and stuff at the public hearing to see if this stuff reconciles out. And I think getting hold of the information or getting their side of the story, the sooner the better, will help us. It could provide us some information to some additional things we need to look at. And the longer we put it off, I think the more problem we have. And I don't have a problem with designating somebody, a limited number of people to participate in the tours, because I mean, just to be quite honest about it, whenever those things are scheduled, I expect that they're going to go in there and spruce it up and clean it up and do everything they can so that it looks a certain way when we get there. So I'm not, I'm not concerned about designating somebody to do that, because I don't believe they're going to take us to some spot or allow us in some spot that they haven't given some attention to in the first place prior to us getting there.
Do you want to make a motion, Mr. Pruitt, then, that the task force designate 4 people?
Three.
Because that's 3, well, I want to say 4 to include Brad.
Yes.
He's-
Well,
yeah,
So
he's
3
being-
people,
It needs to only be 3, so you don't have.
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer to make a motion that you as chairman and Brad can conduct discussions with whoever it is necessary to as quickly as possible get us access to the building and access to the interviews of the detainees, and you have the latitude to negotiate that out with the other side, whether that's one person, 3 people, of everybody. I just like to see it get done.
all right.
Yeah,
Do we need it as a motion?
3, I would say
So
you 2 and Pam
I
Walker.
think, let me see if I understood what you said, Mr. Pruitt, that the task force approved that Chairman Gray and Member Hump
I would want to include,
designate how we're going to approach this.
that they have discussions with the corrections facility and the courts, whoever they need to have it with, to facilitate the tours as quickly as possible. And I want to make sure we give them the latitude to negotiate out whether it's one person or 3 people, all people, that they have that latitude to negotiate that and get it done as quickly as possible without having to come back to the task force as a whole and get approval.
Okay, I think I got it.
I would rather just make a motion that Reverend Gray, Mr. Huck, and Pam Walker do the tour and then report back to the committee what you find. I think that's a reasonable group. I think that, I don't know that we all have to go up there. I mean, I think Pam, because her background, in the medical part, the chairman and yourself should be the 3. I don't think we all need to go up there, and it just delays things, and I trust you to come back. So I would make that motion.
I can accept that.
So,
Okay.
and
All right,
Mr. Pruitt accepts it, so I'll make that motion.
Reverend Norris indicated he don't think we need more. Can we just agree on that by consensus? That the chair, vice chair, and Mr. Hump would be the 3 people that would do the tour?
I think that's good.
Yes. And the interviews.
And the
And then just report back to the committee. I think that's the best, most trustworthy, and I believe you'll tell the truth, you know.
So that sounds up to
If.
Can we
Reverend, if you
do
wanna
this,
go on a
can we
tour-
be in agreement on
if
this?
you wanna go on a
With the tour,
you tell me we'll go.
with the tour, it would be, myself, the vice chair, and Mr. Hump. In the
Yes.
interviews, could we add, Reverend Norris to the interview?
That's why I want to give you authority to do whatever you need to do, Mr. Chairman.
No, it,
Yeah, so. just keep me
Oh, okay, no, so we're good, 3 and 3.
that's good.
Okay, so we're good. Can we agree on that by consensus?
Yeah.
No objection? Okay.
As far as the interviews, you said they have to be public, we didn't talk about that. They won't have it.
And I've got that on the list, we kind of got to have ourselves.
Yeah, sorry, go back.
So.
Mike, we're gonna, so we're clear on that.
They're gonna just say, well, they cleaned it up because we were coming, so I just come.
Okay, we're gonna,
Okay, so,
Before we move from the data, I just have one question.
Sure.
Now, I noticed in the data request, I know I had requested some financial information. Data request, is the financial information considered outside of the scope?
no, it's not.
I didn't see that on this list.
Well, they have on number 5, records of recent contracts and budget requests for maintenance and repair. You're looking for, and again, we're gonna talk.
I was asking for some personnel requests, some personnel related data in terms of just how much personnel cost is, not necessarily breakdown for, each person's salaries, of course, but just to have some idea of what we're looking at, to have some context, because we don't know if
Right.
what impact the shortages are having. It's already clear there's a shortage of personnel.
So what exactly do we want?
We'd like to know what the personnel costs are for the staff. And I think I'd like to know what the administrative cost is as well.
So do we
And the
want to,
capital improvement budget.
Yeah, they did say capital improvement. That's why I'm asking the question. That's all they said was capital improvement.
so do we want the Manning table of how many, in other words, Manning table, like, it's supposed to be 1,000 and there's only 300 workers? I mean, do we want?
Oh, you're supposed to be staffed at 1,000. but you
1,000 and
only
we
got
only got
300.
300. I don't know, them are just.
Well, then we can figure that. We could back
Well,
into it.
we can ask, well, we can just ask for the Manning table. If we ask for the Manning
They
table.
shouldn't have
and
to create any data for this, they should.
Right, they should have
data
that, right.
When they
right,
make their budget presentation. So
Right.
this may be a request that has to go to the budget office.
So what I'd like to do with the data.
Well, I think Dale Glass.
okay, excuse me.
So we've got.
We're working his nerves,
Three-
sorry.
Three things we want to accomplish in the data discussion. One is the tour, the guidelines they set, and we have a agreement on what to ask for. 2 is access to the inmate interviews. The recommendation was that only one person be able to interview the inmates at a time specific to the 3 tasks by the mayor. We're going to ask for 3, is that correct?
Yes.
The third thing is actual data. In the letter, it provides what is going to be worked on this week and provided. And in the original data request, there was a couple things that I believe are directly relevant to the 3 items that we're supposed to look at that are not being provided. Or perhaps maybe to summarize it, it's not sticking out to me. But it's copies of those inspection reports that you had mentioned. And specific also the food service, because we're looking at the food. Activity schedules, and that would be for looking at, reducing the effect of the COVID restrictions, looking at laundry schedules. The inmate handbook is requested, and obviously that would show what directions we give to the inmates and how they can request certain services, laundry, etc. Grievance form, which would help us get to the root of what the process is that they can follow to create food issues, clothing issues, temperature issues. Data from the kitchen, being menu data, kitchen inspection, dietitian reviews, temp logs, laundry procedures, issues and rotation, grievance data for the last 12 months, and I'm assuming that grievance data has to be specific to those issues identified in task number 1.
Right.
And then the facility maintenance data. Those are on the original list that I want to make sure to get. And I'd like to add the overall budget, staffing, administrative costs, capital improvement plan. Anything else you want to be addressed in that?
Just the one thing, interview, a food service contract staff, if the contract is council agreed, so, I guess that's implied that we have to, once we know who's providing, the services to vendors, then we have to approach the vendors and ask them if they'd be willing to talk to us, then they have to get permission, or is that on our list of things to
I
do?
think we'll leave it to Mr. Glass.
Okay.
Because he will determine who we're going to talk to.
Okay.
And I think, obviously, for COVID, it makes sense for him to have his health administrator there, for maintenance, the facilities administrator, for food administrator. But I think we'll leave that to Mr. Glass. And determine that. I'm assuming overall, Commissioner of Corrections, we want the expert to be speaking to us on those particular issues. I would think so.
Again, I guess my only concern with that is that, I understand, the staff that are internal, but if we're talking about, here, we're basically talking about vendors, contractors. And so that's an external entity. I just want to make sure that if it's possible for us to have, accessibility to them.
They should,
Mr. Glass.
well, and we should be able to just simply ask them for the records. I mean, obviously, they're paying for the food and food service. I think we can ask him up here to give us all of the contracts, to show what we've been paying for food, how many
Tab
people
on
and all
food.
that.
I didn't bring my binder, but there is a tab. I can make it.
Medical and food service.
But I
Yeah,
think it's my understanding that Judge Durker has to approve anything that we look at. So that's why we need to make it as a request.
Okay.
There is
Right, okay.
information on the controller about food.
So if we can add that, I mean, just put an asterisk by that. I think it is important to ask to be able to have accessibility to internal staff. But I think that it's also important to have accessibility to people who are supplying, particularly the food
I'm sorry, this is.
and health.
This is how-
I know,
So just one last point of clarification. Relative to the contracts that we're getting regarding food, that should give us the information regarding the supplies, the medical supplies, these contracts. That's what I'm assuming will give us the information that we need to be able to look at these items in context.
Yes. Along with the internal policies and procedures.
Right.
Like, for example, for diet, food, it's going to lay out what they have to provide. How often, what the quality of the meal is, how many calories.
I think there's a tab in that on food that has.
Here, contract pricing.
It has menus,
Right.
and I just don't remember.
Menus is another section.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wonder though, if we could ask about special diets. Obviously, like, somebody like me that's diabetic.
It's just policy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I did
Okay.
see a reference to that, that they
Okay,
do
good.
offer options, if people request it, like Megan.
let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay, Pam, you had mentioned the COVID statistics.
Yeah,
I don't know that we wanted to add that to that list. We just want to have Mr. Glass present that when we're on site, or do we need that?
I just like an aggregate, two aggregate numbers. How many guards have had COVID and how many detainees have had COVID?
We want to include that in my correspondence back to Judge Durker, or do you want to address that on site?
However you think we'll get it. I think we've asked it before and not gotten it, so.
I think we should ask for it again. I think if we ask Glass, then Glass tells us we have to go back to Durker. As Mr. Pruitt said, the quickest way to get to it is probably either talk to Durker. And if Durker says it's okay, then I don't suspect that the commissioner will go against that.
So you can provide me.
Yeah, I'll give you a bullet point.
Okay, and I'll put that all together. Time. Anything else on the letter from Judge Durker or the data request that you want
No, I think that you've covered most of the things. I think that we can go from 2 to 3. I think that that's it. I think they've indicated that they're asking that those interviews be done around the first week of March, which is reasonable. Still gives us an opportunity to be able to get the data and review the data before we do the interviews. So I think that's fine. Interviews of correctional staff. So I think he's basically spelled it out. There was one last on page 3 with regards to access to the secure floors of the corrections of CJC. We note that Judge Phelps, I can't pronounce his name, FLEISSING, recently put a very strict limits on access to MSI by class action counsel due to security and covert concerns. We strongly advise that the task force be limited to 2 members at any given time escorted by staff with the understanding there'll be no engagement with prisoners. We understand that. So I guess is he saying that the limitations given to MSI also or the same limitations that they're going to have, basically just blanket limitations to accessibility.
Here at CJC.
Okay, because he said MSI. and
MSI has to work out.
I know, right, that's what.
I'll just go my
There'll
own.
be no access, there'll be no access. to
Right.
MSI. It's specific, even if people have sensible. But I think what we're asking though is that 2 be
Changed to 3.
to us 3.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what it is.
All right, so I'm
And I personally think we just, if they don't get a response, I would just do, I think that's just a request. I don't think it's yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's a-
no, I disagree. I think that they've asked us to do a job. We're telling them what we need in order to do this job.
Right.
And so for them to say, well, we don't think you need that, I don't think that that's a problem. I
No.
think that we do have to find some middle ground where we can. But I don't think we should allow ourselves as a task force to be dictated to. And so that's my concern. And once again, if we can't take the whole task force in it, then we should still be able to request the minimum component that we think is adequate to do the job that we've been asked.
Well, that's what I said. I said,
Oh,
I don't
really?
even think, no, I said, I don't even think we need to ask them. I say, we've got the 3, we'll just do it. Well, it's not a mandate, it's not a law, it's not a rule, it's a request. We also have the authority. So what I'm saying is, I don't think we need to go back to them. We got the 3, we've all agreed on it. I think the fair committee, I think the chairman, vice chairman.
I don't know, if
I
they,
think we better. I
Yeah,
don't think we
if they
better.
tell Dale
We may not be able to take the ask of forgiveness approach.
We want to leave here with a schedule. and a
Yeah, I just think we
plan.
should.
We're good. We already agreed on the 3. Let's
Yeah,
move.
but
Go ahead, Brad. We're making good progress.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that we can go forward to actually address the tasks at hand. But before I do that, I want to jump in my outline a little bit. We've already talked about tour discussion and wing representative discussion towards the bottom of this, so you cross it out. One of the things in my schedule I proposed for the onsite, and we'll get to the daily schedules in a minute, but I proposed a daily debrief process. So done for the day, we come back and say, this is what I observed. This is what I see, this is possible recommendation. So we can begin to tally those things. And on our last day, we have a final meeting. But taking into consideration the quorum, sunshine, all that stuff, we have to be public if we're all together. Would we still want to do that, or would we not want to do that?
So the debrief would be from those persons taking the tour. They would debrief with the rest of the task force. So that we could all be appraised of what is happening. The question is, well, anytime there's a quorum, then we have to.
We could
have
do
to
it by
follow the
Zoom.
The sunshine law.
We just do it by
I'm
Zoom. We don't have to
comfortable
be.
with that.
I'm okay with that. You can do it via Zoom.
Make those public.
Yeah.
And we'd have to be cognizant of.
Well,
discussing it.
now that's, well, I I guess that's the issue. I see the concern there. It's because we've got raw kind of information.
It's a
But-
discussion.
Right, it's a discussion.
But if you're speaking on any personnel or anything that's like that, we can go into a closed session just while we talk about something that's sensitive or whatever. Again, it'd really be nice if they would assign an attorney to us so that we can ask when we need to go in and out of closed session, because we do it all the time. So we certainly can go into closed session for that brief, especially if we're talking about personnel issues or safety issues. But I would also make sure that we have
I
an
think they
attorney
did
that's
say-
advising
I think they
us.
did say Brian will advise us.
Yes.
On legal issues, but
But he's
he's not
not,
gonna set up the meetings, do the agenda, do the.
So, Mr. Durkin did say we agree that Brian Champion should not serve as a member or administrator of the task force, but he, along with other members of this office, may provide advice to the task force on the same basis as any other city agency. So I think when we get to that point, I know we're gonna apprise them that this is what we're gonna do, and ask them if they would have somebody available, Brian or someone else, during that debriefing, so that he or she can guide us into what we may want to have in court. Glad we do with that.
I just think that we will adopt that afterwards. We should have a closed session. If
There's gonna be security issues.
Yeah, I think that needs to be a
That's
closed
legal?
session.
But-
I think we need to make sure we find out, but
but what I would
Right,
want
so the
is
question is
the
asked-
attorney, because I don't want to personally get sued by somebody saying we
Right. You
violated.
close the
Right.
meeting.
And then
But
they
Brad's
say,
gonna
gee,
follow up on
you-
yeah,
yeah,
that's-
we
You know, I'm
want
gonna
to
have-
put it on the attorney, so.
Okay, excuse me. We really need to move a little bit quicker. Brad is indicating he's gonna follow up on that, so make sure that all of us are comfortable. As all of us said, none of us want to be sued. So once we get to that point, Brad has said he's gonna do it, let's move to the next step.
And this, if you go to page 3 of what I provided you there. We've ebbed and flowed to try to find our way through this. I assume we're gonna do this as a full task force. Now, 3 of us are gonna conduct the interviews, 3 of us are gonna do the tour. But there's also, anyone is free to look at any of the policies, and procedures, and data, and all sort of things. What I've outlined is our goals based on the tasks that the mayor has provided for us. Goal number 1, to investigate the alleged concerns and complaints regarding food, water, temperature, and clothing. And what I basically did here for us, and this is simply to provoke thought, for you to jot down things you want to see, basically tell us 3 that now, and questions you want to have answered. Because what we get done at the end of next week, we want to be able to have met all the tasks. So some of the things that I bolted out is, obviously, we'll look at the policies and procedures in place at CJC. And I've listed those here that are relevant to food. And I've looked at those, but I would encourage everyone else to do the same. I can tell you that the policies, I did not do a line by line evaluation of them compared to ACA standards, but I can tell you from looking at them as a corrections person, they are generally along the lines of what you see in a correctional facility. There's nothing that any of the policies that I saw were, wow, they're missing this off, they're missing the boat. So they're there, but that does not say that there isn't need for improvement. I didn't go through that thoroughly. So with food, we look at the policies, we look at the kitchen on when we go through, we look at the documents that we discussed, menus, logs, temp logs. We possibly observe the food process at the point of plating and serving. One of the biggest issues that I've ever seen in a jail this size is to plate the food and getting that to the point of service is always a challenge. So you may have hot food, by the time it gets to the detainee, it doesn't, that is one of the primary challenges you will see. So that's one of the things you could look at. Possibly even food sampling, interview with staff and contractors as we discussed, interview with the detainees, and reviewing grievance data specific to that. And I outlined the grievance policy there. And basically, if you look at that policy, which is online, it shows their grievance policy. Now, the other thing that I think is important for us on this review is once we've read the policies, one of the biggest things that we look for when we do a review of a correctional facility is you want to make sure that the policy meshes the practice. You can write a great policy, you can take a policy from another jail and put that in place, but you need to actually carry that out. And sometimes that's through the lack of resources, the problem, staff don't understand, or maybe they're following, but that's what we will want to look at, see if they're following the policies that they have, and if not, make some recommendations on how they can steer
Yeah, one of the things we've all seen in the paper is people saying they didn't just eat it all. So none of this gets us to that. We're gonna have to get to that some other way.
Well, they'll have records of the meal served.
Yeah, okay.
They'll have actually, they have every meal record, they'll have that. They'll have that.
So we'll be able to look at the meal records on.
Absolutely. So water, the same thing, policy procedure. I noted on the internet that the water policy is under revision. Another policy that deals with that is their inmate hygiene. One of the things that I always look at in a water policy, which I believe, if I read between the lines correctly here, is water issue isn't necessarily access or having water, hot and cold water, it's that it's shut off at times. That's very important to have in a policy, what the requirements are and documenting. And what I'm used to, which is standard practice across the country, is if you shut it off, there has to be an incident report. And if it's shut off for any length of time, everyone has to be offered drinking water every so often. So we'll take a look at that. We'll look at the water management system available, and what I mean by that is sometimes you have manual shutoffs for each cell. Sometimes you have a manual shutoff for a whole unit. Sometimes they have electronic systems right in their control center that they can actually control how often things are flushed and such. So look at that, water quality reports, grievance data, and moving on to temperature.
Before you do that, we're gonna take a break in about 8 minutes, quarter till, give everybody a 10-minute break. Because we've been at this since 9, at least a quick 10-minute break. I don't know about y'all, but I can take my medicine for my lady.
Oh,
So if we can, like I said, Brad, if we can, go ahead and about quarter till, we'll take a good 10-minute break. And then
Okay. As it relates to the temperature issue, there's policy there, environmental conditions. Look at temp logs, and see the climate control system they have in place. And I know even in our binder there, we've already provided the temp logs. We'll have some discussion with detainees. We can possibly, I don't know if they have, they make a temperature gun that you can actually point it into a room. And I don't know if they have one of those here, but if they have one, they could possibly show us while we're doing our tour. To take the temperature, and then we can review grievance data in that area. Clothing, moving on to page 4. Again, they have a policies and procedures in place regarding what they're allowing, the laundry schedule, the exchange schedule. Again, we'll talk to staff, we'll talk to detainees to see what's the practice meshes policy. Look at the facility, look at the laundry storage. And in that storage, you want to look at the condition of the laundry, make sure it's being replaced appropriately. Take a look at the laundry exchange process. Again, the schedules, is there any seasonal clothing or is there a need for seasonal clothing? I don't know. I don't believe they have any outdoor recreation here today.
No,
So they
not
probably-
here. Not here, but at my side.
So they probably don't have a need for seasonal clothing, but again, what you're likely to hear from the detainees, they're inactive, especially during COVID when they can't go to exercise.
Yeah.
So 70 degrees doesn't always necessarily feel warm, but it's psychological. They're warm, but it's psychological. So we can look at seasonal clothing needs, and then again, reviewing the grievance data in those areas. And that's how I think we would accomplish the mayor's #1 task.
The other thing I would add is that all of these things are looked at when the city health department comes in to do a sanitation inspection. So seeing those reports will allow us to see what was the norm, over the last year as they did those inspections versus what may be happening now.
And I will say that the policy that I read calls for a sanitation inspection by the health department twice a year. Now that's.
Yeah, it'd be important to see those, I think.
Okay. Want me to start goal number 2? You want to take that break?
I think for my legs sake, I probably.
We'll take the break.
Let's say.
That's gonna keep going.
Okay, for those who listen, let's just take a quick 10-minute break. It is now,
Before you do that,
Yes.
Mr. President, I just wanted to just point out that, so for those persons taking the field, it's gonna be really important for you all, since you all are gonna be our eyes and ears, in terms of looking at what these gaps that may occur. Also with the understanding, there are going to be some people that have complaints. But the question is, are there enough complaints that are outside of some type of normal range that signifies a issue? And so I think that's just going to be important for you all to understand, and I think for us as a task force to understand.
And I believe we'll give Mr. Glass and his staff a chance to respond to those issues. We want to hear both sides.
Yeah, and what's normal may not be okay, but that's not what we're asked to look at.
Exactly.
and just for clarification, when you say interviews with detainees, we're talking specifically about the representative.
Yes.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene 10 minutes till 11. It's now 20 minutes till. We'll reconvene 10 minutes.
Does anybody know where the restroom is?
It's right out there, right like that, where you first walked in.
Actually, We are now unmuted.
All right.
Okay. So it's, I
Well,
guess I have
we're
us
still on the
back.
10-minute break.
Oh, STL, can you get us back?
Yes, you're still in line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will now reconvene with forum and we'll continue with the consultant presentation.
Okay, we're on page 5 of what I provided. Begin the goal number 2, as was read by the chairman earlier. And the task underneath that, again, address isolation due to COVID-19, the backlog of court cases. The thoughts that I have there is to review the current protocols and procedures in place. Good with COVID. Make any recommendations, use the COVID-19 assessment tool that Mr. Walker has so graciously put together for us to use. Policies and procedures and protocols, we'll take a look at those. Chapter 4.2, the health services policies address some of those issues as far as how to deal with the pandemic. There's a number of memorandums that I saw on the CJC's website regarding how they're dealing with COVID. Again, staff and detaining interviews. And then as we go through the facility, looking at housing, healthcare, and receiving, taking a look at all those issues, just to take a look at what's happening with COVID-19, any recommendations we might have. Again, identify recommend ways to mitigate the isolation created by COVID-19, because we know that movement with restricted activities are restricted. So we take a look again at policy procedures, basically their inmate programs policies, that includes the recreation, the commissary, their telephone, all those sort of things. Talk to the detainees and the staff, identify losses that may have occurred due to COVID with those restrictions, and take a look at considering what can be added as far as things that can be added in to help mitigate the frustration that the COVID restrictions have caused. What's wanted, what's acceptable, and what are viable options. I can tell you that in some jurisdictions, typically here, and I'm assuming it's the case here, that they pay for time on the phone.
And it's really expensive.
So,
And, I've fought that one before. In that one, because they say, well, we just put it out for bid, but it's like $3, maybe more than that a minute. And so if you call up someone who's in here, you're the one that pays it. So for a short time, it really makes it really hard for someone that doesn't have a lot of money to communicate. I'm saying it's $3 a minute, but it's really up there. I don't know the exact number, and I always felt it needs to be free or made accessible. And I was told it goes out for bid and they're cheaper than most, but it seems like it makes it really hard.
the reason I have that on is not to beat the contract, but I think what a lot of people have put in place during COVID, because there's increased isolation, is they have allowed for 1 or 2 free calls in time period for the detainees during COVID, just as a token to say, we know you're further isolated because of loss of business and such.
Right.
So they've done that. We have discussed. The other thing some people have done is they've started Zoom visits. In-person visiting issue. So those are the things that we could probably postage and paper. Some of those things that might help reduce the frustration. So we'll take a look at all that. And again, these are just things that came to my mind that we can look at to address those issues. Another part of goal number 2 is again outline the need to move cases to the courts. Again, we've got feelers out to the judge. We have feelers out to the CBCC to provide us some information. Look at that. We can review the population data, the length of stay. We can talk to the staff, hear from the wing representatives as far as their frustration with that, and then we just make recommendations on that. Moving on to page 6. Identify, recommend ways to mitigate the escalation through the length of stay through the court. Again, we're interviewing people looking at the policy as far as access to courts, access to legal services, access to law library, inmate programs. And as we go through, look at access to the courts, attorneys, legal materials. And they have courts. Then the very final, number 3,
Before you go to that, the right question, will you give, once we, I guess we will make a motion to approve this if we need to do that. But will you give this action plan to the CJ, CJCC? Okay, and the reason I asked that, if one of their concerns is, coordinated effort, once they see what we're doing, know what we're doing, there may be information that they can give us. There may be an overlap. I do agree with them is that no one entity is going to be able to solve everything. But I think we want to show them that we're prepared to cooperate with them. And in the absence of any more communication back and forth, them seeing what we're doing and looking at it, there may be something that they've already done on here so that we're not being redundant and they might just provide us with their findings. So just as a question.
and then the final goal is becoming appraised with the urgent building and equipment needs of the facility. Interviewing Mr. Glass and his people that he feels are appropriate to be there. We'll hear from the detainees. We're going to walk through the place. Hope to get a list of things they're already aware of and already identifying, and projects planning and the budgeting process that we discussed for the capital improvements project. As far as equipment, along the same lines, we'll be talking to administration again, anything we may hear from the detainees, viewing the facility, list of issues already identified by CPC, and again, projects planning and budgeting and processes in place. That's how I think that we can get to an end goal to have a written report to provide to the mayor, and that would be along our schedule. We'll talk about the schedule in a minute. Each day we have the daily debrief as we talked about, and we have the final debrief. And then as we discuss our findings and our recommendations, keep track of that and we'll put that together in a report format. Before I go to the schedule, I just want to talk about, I missed over this on our outline. We have the public input Zoom meetings today. They were initially scheduled from 2 to 4 and 6 to 8. Only people have signed up. So those will be at 2 o'clock, and those will be Zoom. This group is not available for us to meet this group. I did check on that. They have their shift shift change.
But I just zoom in from my house anywhere, so
And I think that,
a lot more convenient.
we're going to reconvene from home.
So Brian Chapman, the champion, will make sure that gets kicked off. Okay, we can also end, but I just want to talk briefly about the process. I don't know if we need to have discussion on. I'm simply going to make an introduction as the chair that, this is about CJC, and we're just going to listen. Is there going to be feedback? What is your?
No, I think that we have indicated that we just want to listen. Because I think once we said, thank you, Ms. Reverend Norris might have mentioned, we're talking about a listening session. And so we are going to reiterate the 3 topics. And we're going to ask you to give testimony based on those 3 topics. And we're not going to do a question and answer. I think that one of the things, and I'm trying to find my notes, that I did indicate some possible questions. And I did it through my notes. I'm not sure if it came out. I don't think people were able to.
Yeah, I couldn't open it. But are we going to ask them questions?
Well, I was just gonna ask, name, address,
Oh, gotcha.
that kind of stuff. because
Who they
it's a public
represent,
hearing. Right, just name, address, if you're speaking on behalf of yourself or a detainee. And ask them if they're willing to give that detainee's name. And ask, have you provided any documentation regarding your testimony? So basically,
I would, only thing I would say is, I don't know, I mean, again, in public safety, the way we do it, even though we have them submit their name and address, we don't publicly say it. Because if I say, well, I'm, in your case, Reverend Gray, I live at this address, and then you say somebody doesn't like, now you're on Front Street, that you live at this address, and if you know the mayor said address, it's a very public record. But then everybody basically started protesting and carrying on outside City Hall. I don't think I mean, certainly you can if that's what you want to do, but I would caution against putting anybody, your name is and you live at this address. Because I think you put them at risk.
well, I don't have a problem with not asking.
No, I would just say if you live in the city or county, you get general, that's what, if you notice, that's what I do, or whose ward, what ward are you in? Do you live in the city? Do you have someone that is a detainee, someone, that you give, but not, who is that person, or how long has he been, or where was he at? And considering there's only two people, I wouldn't even worry about giving them, I would give them as much time as they want, because if there was like 30 or 40 people, you'd have to stick in that 2 to 3 minutes. And if it's two people,
Well, the first one's gonna be limited regardless, because the second one's scheduled right behind it. So,
So
okay,
just a technical question. Who's gonna drive Zoom?
right.
Unmute him and then unmute whoever's speaking.
well, you would do yourself. I mean,
No, Brian is gonna assist.
Okay.
when you log on, like, to your Zoom, like, we already have a
I know
log.
that. I think the public meeting, for a public meeting, you could mute everybody.
All right,
You
then somebody
mute
has to let them in.
So Brian is going.
He's gonna let people in. Okay,
Yeah, somebody has to be
right.
clerk or something.
Okay. So doing very well on the schedule here. And one of the final things I have to talk about, besides any questions and answers, we'll talk about that in a summary of our status at the end here. But we'll talk about a schedule, because we changed process a little bit here, because there's gonna be 3 of us touring and 3 of us interviewing detainees. Initially, I had scheduled for on-site for next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday morning would be our final debrief as a task force, where we would then separate and begin the report writing process. I know, I'm sorry.
They don't like us.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
So on day 1, then, there would only be the need for 3 of us to be on site. To have the kickoff meeting, basically just to make sure we're logistically set up with the jail administration. Tour, and we begin the wing representatives. And we wouldn't necessarily have to have a daily debrief on day 1. There's no need to have everybody change or log in or come at that point. And then day 2, I had following up, continuing wing representative interviews if we needed to, and then we would start our discussions with Mr. Glass and his staff, whether it be food service, laundry, maintenance, healthcare. Starting that in the afternoon, day 2, finishing all of that on day 3. So if you want to have a debrief on a daily debrief on with the entire task force on the end of those days, you just want to have it. Well, what the 3 of us have found on Friday.
I think we first have to make sure that it's okay to go into closed session. That was one of the things that I think there's a consensus that we'd like to have closed session regarding the debrief. And did I hear you say it might not be, we need to have a debrief after day one?
Right,
Well, because,
Well, but we're having the wing representations at the two.
but we may not have, well, yeah, we could certainly do that.
Yeah.
We can do it each day.
Yeah, and yeah, because I agree with Reverend Norris. I like that because I was gonna ask a question too. Because we've got different things. If we're gonna talk about the room, to the room reps about meals and something one day and get an opportunity to talk to them again about something else, that may be a lot. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna break these interviews down to, we've got three different segments. But if we're gonna break those in half and let them know, well, today, this is what we want to talk about. And then when we meet with you again, we want to talk about this. So it's not to compile all of it at one time, or what do you think? I mean,
I would lengthen the interview with the detainee and cover all three topics.
okay,
Because they have to escort back and forth each time.
gotcha.
That's what I would.
And basically, that's just a continuation. So it'll be 1, 2, 3. All right,
It sounds like there's a minimum of 8. Some units have 2 reps, but there's 8 units, so at least want to talk to the primary rep. So 8 people.
so we have 8, that was the other question.
So, and I know you don't have to be here for the tour interview with all, but you mentioned an election on Tuesday. You guys still okay with starting us on Tuesday so we can get it wrapped up?
I'm fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
only thing, like I said, I could zoom in at some point, but elections Tuesday, there's gonna be a lot of, I would hope everybody's gonna be really busy.
So what I will do is I will make the final adjustments to this agenda and get it to Mr. Glassman so we can prepare his staff escorts we need. So we'll be on site next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday morning. We would have a final meeting of the task, not necessarily a final, but a final meeting following the on-site assessment. So we all leave with the same understanding, and then we will work to get the report done in the next week after that.
Then we send the report back to the mayor's office. I assume the report, I guess, goes back to the mayor's office.
Final report, I guess, I would assume.
Then what I would say after the mayor's office, a week or two down the road, and you don't have to be here for it, but then I would think that maybe Reverend Gray would bring to the Public Safety Committee, to just go over, because I think a lot more people seem to come to that meeting for some reason. I usually have there's a bunch. There's usually for some reason, 80 or 90 people seem to zoom into that meeting.
Perhaps our report also, one of the recommendations would be is CJC gets a copy, your committee gets a copy. It'd be nice, like you said, you want transparency and everybody. to be on the same
Right.
page.
That would be nice.
So that's really what I think will drive us to get to the end process. Questions from me or anything we can chat about the process?
No, I think, I was in the Army for 5 years in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. My drill sergeant used to say, are there any questions? It shouldn't be, because I think I made myself clear. Brad, you've done an excellent job, and I think that you've made it clear. Mr. Pruitt, do you have any questions for Brad?
No, what I would have a request that we invite the head of the public defender's office to come and speak before us if she doesn't in this doing one of these public sessions. It'd be very interesting to understand their perspective on all of this.
Okay,
She may or may not want to, but we could ask. Right, and, I mean,
Add them in on Fridays.
okay.
If they want.
Ms. Pruitt, Brad suggested that we could add them into Friday's agenda. Next
Sounds
Friday.
great. Sounds great.
That's really all I have. I think we've got a path forward.
I'm gonna turn my-
Something to Judge Durker today and get scheduled to Commissioner Glass, and then we're back next Tuesday.
I'm gonna turn my paperwork back in, because I don't know if you want to strike, keep it,
All
whatever.
right,
but-
do we need a motion to accept the plan, the action plan from Brad? Do we need a motion?
I don't think
Or
so.
can
I
we
think
agree by
just do it.
consensus?
I think
Is
we're
there any
good to go.
objection? All right, seeing that there's no objection, the task force has agreed.
Pam, I'm fighting about
Uh,
those
to
lots. She has
the,
not sent me back, but I will
Action
get your
plan
answer.
and the agenda
for the lots.
that Brad has presented. Is there any other business to be brought before the task force? Just a reminder, for those who are listening online, public hearings today from 2 to 4. We encourage individuals and organizations to submit any information or testimony, evidence that you might have as it relates to this task force and our mandate. It's important. We encourage organizations who have been doing this work as detainee advocates. If you have information, we understand that Congresswoman Bush's office has received phone calls and information. We would love to have someone from her office share with the task force her findings, the information that she has gathered. We understand that Representative Rasheed Aldridge has also received phone calls and information. We would like to know what that information is. It may be helpful to what we are doing. We understand that our city defenders and OBS and Expo as organizations, ACLU, all of these organizations have been on the front line advocating on behalf of detainees in CJC. If you have information that you believe would be helpful in helping us to make recommendations, we're asking that you would work with us, share what information you can within the limits of the rights of the detainees, so that we may move forward as swiftly and as effectively and accurately as possible. At the end, any task force members have any final comments before we adjourn for 2 o'clock? All right, then, if there are no comments or questions, then we will adjourn until 2 o'clock, where we will reconvene at our public hearing. Thank you very much.